Okay, with that, I'd like to get started with our closing plenary. Steve Zeltzer. Steve Zeltzer with the Communication Workers of America and Pacifica Media Workers is going to talk to us a little bit about building the network that we need to move this labor movement forward.
Thank you, brothers and sisters. Actually, we're in exciting times because we're in dangerous times for working people all over the world. As we know from the sessions that we've had here, people are under attack. They're under attack at Amazon. They're under attack in the fields of Mexico. They're under attack in Illinois and Gary, Indiana, where they're privatizing the water, privatizing our schools, through charter schools. So what can we do about it? What can working people do about it? Well, the first thing is to educate themselves about what's happening. And we as a movement and a network have to start educating working people about the struggles, the issues. Why are these things happening? Why are they spending trillions of dollars of war around the world, but they can't take care of the people of Puerto Rico? They can't put the electricity on? Something is really screwed up. Why is it people are hungry? Why in San Francisco, where I'm from, you have 130 billionaires and you have people in tents, working people in tents because they can't afford housing? So these are the issues that are confronting us. And I think what we know from history is the working class in this country have tremendous power. They have tremendous power. And at one time, workers were organized at General Motors and Ford, and people said they can't be organized. These companies are not going to allow unions. That was the reigning thought at that time. And the workers in this country organized them. They had occupations, they had sit-ins, they had general strikes. That's part of our history. That's part of our history. So we need a campaign of education, of communication. And I think the actions that we took yesterday, both to support immigrant workers, was critical, because this country is built by immigrants. And what this government is doing and what the bosses are doing are blaming immigrant workers for this crisis. That's a lie. Immigrant workers are not responsible for the crisis in this country. The multinationals and the billionaires are responsible for this crisis. It's like blaming immigrants for 2008. Who's responsible for 2008 when millions of people lost their homes? Was it the immigrants? Was it the unions? Did unions cause that? It's a system. It's a system that's about profit, that they don't care if they can turn over a house. Right now in the Bay Area in California, the capitalists are flipping houses. They're flipping houses, so you can make a lot of money flipping a house. Well, who loses their homes? Poor people, working people, retired people. They're kicking people 99 years. An African-American woman, Iris Canada, was kicked out of her home in San Francisco. 99 years old, and she died after she lost her home. Because when you're evicted from your home and you're an old person, you die. That's murder. That's what they're doing to people in this country who've given their lives, who've worked all their lives for this country. They're terrorizing them with murder. So when they talk about terrorism in this country, I look at the people who are really terrorizing people, which is this government and the billionaires, the multinationals. They're telling people they don't have a future. They're telling young people that they go to college and they end up with debt and they're paupers even before they start their career. This is a lot of the reason young people voted for Bernie Sanders. They want to change. They want a future. They see no future in this system. People are looking for a future, and the fact of the matter is, this is a great country. This is a beautiful country. We have beautiful people in this country. This is a country from people all over the world. It's a powerful country. But the system is screwed up, really screwed up. It's a sick system. Let's get some more guns. They talk about violence, the guns in this country. The idea that you can solve the problems by bombing another country or giving guns to people. That's the ideology of this country. You can solve things by violence. We have to solve the problems in this country by solidarity. We have to solve this country by communities standing together, workers standing up for human rights and workers' rights. That's how we're going to solve the problems in this country. That's how we're going to solve the problems in this country. And we can build a movement, which we have to do in this country, when we can bring people together to defend the Driscoll workers, to defend the Amazon workers, to defend the workers who are locked out or on strike. That is the purpose of this network. We're going to build a mass movement in this country to defend working people. And working people, when they see that they're not alone, when they see they're not by themselves and people are going to stand up with them, they'll get excited. Because people are afraid now. People are terrorized. People are afraid to speak up on their job. They call this a democracy. I've always wondered, how can you have a democracy when a worker on a job is afraid to speak out, when there are health and safety problems, and they call this a democracy? When people can't speak out and talk about their conditions, that's not a democracy, that's terrorism. So we need to build a strong working class movement that backs up workers and build a democratic labor movement. We need democracy. We need debate and discussion in this labor movement, and it's going to come. The reason it's coming is because people have no choice. People are against the wall. People are living check to check. People are living check to check, and they can't survive, and their children don't have a future. That's why we're going to organize. So let's use this opportunity of bringing together our different struggles and our action to build a national and international network. Let's build a network when workers go on strike or locked out, we all rally together. You think about the millions of workers. If we stand together as one, we can beat these companies. We can beat these employers. Ford, General Motors, these companies can be beaten. We had a brother, Frank, talking about the Colombian GM workers. That would end immediately if the GM workers in this country stood up and said, no, you're not going to fire workers who get injured. Why should a worker be fired who gets injured on the job? Think about that. You put your life on the line, you get injured at a job, and then you're fired and your whole life is ruined. That's what's happening to workers in this country. That's wrong, it's immoral, it's criminal, and yet it happens every day. Many of the homeless people in this country are injured workers. They're in the streets because they've been injured, and then they get cut off from their workers' comp. They can't get their medical care. Many of them become addicted. They refuse to give them surgery, but they give them drugs for the drug companies. That's what they do. They give them drugs. They're in pain. Instead of taking care of their injury, they give them drugs. They talk about the opioid addiction. The drug companies make money from that. The drug companies make money from that. In California, so-called reform of workers' comp allowed the companies to cut people off of medical care. They even prevented people from getting medical treatment. And they say that that's reform. It's like reforming education by getting rid of public schools. Reforming education by bringing in charters and privatizing education. That's not reform, that's destruction of our basic rights. So one of the things that we have to do as well is have communication. We're videotaping this conference. I want to thank Larry Duncan from Labor Beat. I want to thank, being here. I want to talk about Real Work News, because one of the things that we have to do is we have to build a communication network. The voices here of working people have to go out all over this country, all over this world. We need a national labor channel with labor news and history of information of the workers' struggles in this country. We have a great history, working people, but they don't know about it. In fact, that's one of the reasons we started Labor Fest in San Francisco, to commemorate the San Francisco General Strike. And I want to say something about general strikes, because the unions' leadership are afraid of general strikes. Why would you be afraid of a general strike? Why would you be afraid of a general strike? Well, a general strike is the collective power of the entire working class. And one of the reasons the unions were built in this country in the 1930s, there were general strikes. There was a general strike in Minneapolis. There was a general strike in San Francisco when 2 workers were shot, 2 longshoremen. What happens in a general strike is you have the collective power of all the workers, and then the capitalists, the bosses, are afraid to fire workers when they unionize. That's what happens. When workers are not afraid anymore and they back each other up, you'll have millions of people join unions. And that's what we have to have in this country. The millions of unorganized have to be brought into our unions. But that is only going to happen when we have a workers' movement that stands and backs up workers, regardless of their union. When the Nissan workers in Mississippi try to organize, we cannot leave that to Mississippi. We need to unite nationally and internationally against Nissan. We're fighting multinational companies that use their power, their global power, to attack workers. We, the American workers and workers around the world, need to unite together against these multinationals. We need to have international strikes of these companies. UPS, when workers go out here, we need support, they need support around the world. That is what's going to win our struggles. So we need a new view of internationalism. A new view of internationalism. Our fight here is the victory of our brothers and sisters around the world. And our victory here is a victory for them. When we win the struggles here, that helps workers around the world. And they know that. The bosses know that. That's why they want to keep us worried about, the terrorists, quote unquote terrorists. Let's worry about the terrorist. I say our enemy is at home. That's our enemy. That's our enemies. That's our enemies. When you talk about enemies, these are the people that are destroying working people's lives in this country. The 8 million people that lost their homes, the millions of people lost their homes, who did that? You know who did that? Mnuchin, who's the Treasury Secretary. He was involved in kicking people out of their homes in California, and now he's running the Treasury? And he wasn't prosecuted by Kamala Harris, who was the Attorney General. I mean, we have a situation in California. You heard about Wells Fargo Bank, where they set up 2 million fake accounts. Now, if you or I set up a fake bank account, what do you think would happen to us? Yeah, we'd go to jail. But the Wells Fargo executives and owners are not going to jail. They won't touch them. They let this guy, the CEO, retired with $100 million after he set up 2 million fake bank accounts. And the whistleblowers, the workers at Wells Fargo who spoke up and said, I do not want to set up illegal bank accounts. I don't want to set up a fake bank account. Those workers were fired, and when they went to OSHA, OSHA covered it up. And Daryl Whitman, who I've worked with, a lawyer, a federal lawyer, he tried to defend those workers, and he and other investigators were fired for trying to defend workers who did not want to commit crimes.
How are we setting up the network?
Yeah. So we are going to set up this network today, and we want people to participate in it. We're going to be having a conference call of a steering committee. We want people to volunteer to participate in that steering committee. It's going to have monthly meetings. We're going to have a website that links up all the struggles around the country. So if you have a strike or a lockout or a fight, it'll be on this website so people can go to it. We have to link up all these struggles, and we have to build solidarity. We have to have a newsletter of workers' voices. We have to have a workers' channel. The voices of the farm workers, the voices of auto workers, the voices of the homeless, they have to be on this channel. Let's build a labor communication network and use social media to get our power out around the world in all languages. We can do it. We can do it. So I want to thank you all for being here. This is a long struggle, and it's not going to end with the conference. But what I have to say is, this conference is not about talking only. This conference is talking action. The way we're going to change this country is action. When people see you in action and fighting, then they see you're for real. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Okay, I'd like to bring up one of my mentors. This is a man that's very special to me. When I was a young activist in the UAW, passing out leaflets, Mike came and joined my softball team just so he could get in my head. Brother Mike Elliott has been an activist darn near his whole life, long before I met him, and he's instilled those values in me, and I want to thank him for that. So without further ado, I want to bring Mike Elliott up. He's going to talk to you a little bit about CPAC and an action that's coming up this November.
I raised that boy. Greetings, everybody.
Greetings.
You're in my union hall, I want you to know. I retired in '09, but still active, and I've stepped to the mic many times in this union hall. So today, I want to talk about something that's very important, something that's actually a threat to our existence, and that is out of control police brutality. In Chicago, which has a long history of police abusing people and murdering people and torturing people and unjustly jailing people and sending them to prison for life terms by forcing them to confess to crimes that they haven't committed. There's currently over 100 men still in prison that were tortured into making false confessions by the Chicago police. All the cases are well documented. The judicial system knows about it. They've been investigated on a federal level, but these men still linger in prison because they were tortured into signing confessions against their will. And we've had prosecutors that accepted those signatures, saying that, well, if they didn't do it, they wouldn't have signed it. But when you look at some of the torture techniques that were used against these men, and some of these techniques were learned in Vietnam, they forced confessions out of a lot of people. And as a result of that, the state of Illinois has a torture and relief commission that investigates those crimes. The city of Chicago has paid reparations to many of the torture victims, the only city in the United States to do so. And there's been various reports on a state, federal level that goes into detail about what happened to those men and what the Chicago police continually do as they target, in particular, young black men. Well, I'm chair of the Chicago Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression's Labor Committee, and I'm here to talk about what we feel very strongly is a solution to police crimes. And it's called a Civilian Police Accountability Council. And it's an ordinance that we had introduced into the city council. It's actually in the city council right now, but it's being held hostage in a committee, and they won't let it out because of the threat that it presents to the power structure. And the reason it threatens the power structure is because it will take the power of the mayor to appoint people and to create his various task force to oversee the police, because all of those that have been appointed in the past, at the end of the day, they always prove to be controlled by the police. It ends up being the police policing the police, and so they're never found guilty of anything. With the Civilian Police Accountability Council, we have 22 police districts in the city of Chicago. There will be a representative elected from each police precinct. From each police precinct, there's 22. And they will sit on a citywide board, a citywide council, citizens council. And they will make the decisions on charging police and firing the police and investigating police crimes. And so that's the threat that it represents. It represents a shift in power. And that's why it's being held hostage in committee right now. So we've been gathering signatures in support of it. We have over 50,000 people that support it right now. And we've been building support through the labor unions, through activist organizations, and through churches to back this ordinance. And it's growing, our support is growing every day. So I want you all to go to stoppolicecrimes.com to find out more. Find out more about what we do as an organization and find out more details about the Civilian Police Accountability Council, which the acronym is CPAC. Okay. So this Black Friday, like we've done in other Black Fridays, we're going to have a massive boycott on Michigan Avenue, the Magnificent Mile, so we can affect the pocketbooks, so we can have an economic impact on the folks that support the mayor and that have been the enablers of these police to continue to do what they do. 2 years ago, they lost $1.4 billion as a result of our boycott. So we shut shit down. And we're going to do it again on a massive level the Friday after Thanksgiving this year. I hope everybody can participate. You'll be seeing all that posted on our webpage at stoppolicecrimes.com. And, you know, I'm so proud that everybody has come out to participate in this. But, you know, the struggle goes on, and it never stops. Because they never stop. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about stopping Trump and also supporting the Civilian Police Accountability Council, CPAC. So, everybody, I'm really proud to see you all, and I just want to thank you so much for having me here. Peace.
Okay, I'd like to bring up Frank Hammer now. Frank is going to tell us a little bit more about a topic you touched on earlier today. A SOTRA call, the Association of Injured and Fired Workers at the GM plant in Bogota, Colombia. Here you go, Frank.
I don't know about you, but it's been a long day. But it's been a very productive day. Really good, really solid. And I think this is embarking on a very, very important road, and that is building a working class solidarity network, an action network, and one that's going to reach out not just within the national borders, but one that reaches internationally. So I've spoken with some of you today about the struggle of these very valiant GM workers in Colombia. You heard Steve speak about them a little earlier, that their only crime was that they were injured on the job. We're good? We're good? The workers who were injured on the job decided that they were going to fight back. They were fired for their injuries, and they have done incredibly valiant things, including forming a tent encampment at the U.S. Embassy, where they have been now for 6 years. If you can just imagine for a moment that you have lost your job and you went and occupied a tent in front of the embassy, and you have been there now for 6 years. in the city of Bogota, which incidentally is 8,000 feet up in the mountains. So that's where the struggle is taking place. And it could only take place, it could only sustain with the solidarity that we've expressed here in this country and in other parts of the world, including from Brazil. We've had a guest today, Herbert Claros. Brazilians have lent their support to the Colombians, as well as many auto workers in the U.S., solidarity activists in the communities. And part of that support has been in the form of money. We have sustained them so that they have been able to sustain their tent encampment. And I have 2 cans here that I'm going to circulate in the audience. I'm going to make a few more remarks, but I would really appreciate if we can tell the Colombian workers that not only do we speak about their struggle, not only do we declare solidarity, but we also did some reaching into our pockets and giving them some financial support. They're still trying to, they've faced evictions. If you could circulate that around. Thank you. So even though their struggle is to reach a settlement with General Motors or to get back to work, which they have not achieved, they have achieved some other quite amazing accomplishments. They actually forced General Motors to change its workplace, make it more ergonomics. Not enough, but some. They have actually started a movement of injured workers associations in Colombia that look to the tent encampment as basically their workers' center. They have initiated an investigation by the labor ministry in Colombia of the GM facilities, and they have been justified in all the workers' claims. So even though they have not themselves returned back to work, they have actually elevated the struggle in Colombia, and we have been part of that. So I would appreciate your donations. It will be submitted to them in the name of the National Action Worker Solidarity Network. Thank you so very, very much. Appreciate you all your support.
Okay, at this time, we'd like to learn a little bit more about what's going on in the Teamsters. This is the 20th anniversary of the victorious strike at UPS, and the Teamsters has a very vibrant democracy in their union, all the way up to the international level. And I'd like to introduce to you John Palmer. He's the International Vice President of the Teamsters in the Southern District of the United States.
Well, first of all, I feel like it's a privilege to be invited here. I want to thank Scott, the entire local here, Steve, for keep calling me, harassing me, making sure I show up, I feel like we really are in a critical period right now, as trade unionists and trying to recapture our voice in the labor movement and expand it out and make it matter globally, so that our voices are heard. Right now, we're just a reflection of the bureaucracies that we fight against. My international union has an HR department, runs, functions, smells like a corporation to me, and they have 6 unwelcome visitors now on their general executive board, myself included. So my wife is a history teacher, and history is extremely important. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Minneapolis strike, which started May 16th, 1934. There are a lot of similarities with things in the past and things in the present. So the Teamsters at that time, under the leadership of Dan Tobin were a very, very conservative union. They didn't like the idea of striking. It didn't make financial sense to them. They were also the support structure behind the industry because of their ties to transportation. And of course, there was a strike in that time. And over time, we had developed traditions and pockets of solidarity throughout the country. One of those areas was Minneapolis. So while our international itself was resistant to the use of the strike as a weapon, we did take on a strike. But unfortunately, it appears to be the same case today as I speak to you. My union boasts quite a bit about their huge strike fund, and as a member of the opposition slate, every time I have to listen to Jim Hoffa or Ken Hall brag about that, it's obvious to me. The last time I remember walking a picket line was in the 90s. I went out on strike as a freight member in 94, and we struck UPS in 1997. That was a really, really important strike. The 1933 strike ended in what we know today as Bloody Friday. The police attacked and shot strikers in downtown Minneapolis. They killed 2, injured 67. Other unions, particularly in the building trades, began to strike in sympathy. This is what we're talking about. We know it's not legal to strike, just to walk off the job. But if we can build this solidarity, we need to envision, as the Europeans do on a regular basis, the idea that a general strike's the way to get things done. And that may be down the road, but we need to start thinking in those terms. So the ongoing violence lasted periodically through the summer of '33, and it finally ended in August the 22nd. The strike was really effective. It ended the majority of commercial traffic into the city. The only people that really got in and out of the city were farmers that hauled produce directly to the stores. So the strike was quite successful. Today, labor leaders speak of unity, but it really is merely an echo chamber fed to them by their political consultants in the name of self-preservation. The labor movement's fragmented, decaying, and cannibalizing itself from within. As an organizer, one of the most offensive things I've been forced to do over the years is to go out and raid other unions. Our membership now in the labor movement will probably be less than 10% very shortly once the right to work issues go through are heard at the Supreme Court. The public sector, we're going to lose large numbers of workers there. My math from Texas school tells me that there's probably 9 out of 10 workers in America that could be organized. Why the hell are we stealing each other's members? I don't get it. So we need to build a strong democratic labor movement from within. We must link up with unions internationally and directly with workers here and across the globe. I can think of a few examples where my own international union has used global corporate leverage strategies to win in organizing campaigns. I'll have to admit it, even a stop clock is right twice a day, right? The problem that I have with these strategies is they're being implemented in a corporate manner. They're not, we have organizing departments in our unions that anybody that's ever organized for a union knows the organizing models make sense. They work, but our international unions are getting further and further away from that. The organizing departments are, in just about every international union, are highly politicized and just a tool for the bosses, I hate to use that term because I'm an organizer, that run our unions. I got to find my spot here. So, okay. So an old friend of mine told me at one time that there are two models in the labor movement, and I think he's right. The first model is the organizing model, and anybody who's ever organized workers and empowered them to make change in the workplace understands how well that works. And the other one is the patriarchal model, which is what we unfortunately see in our unions now. I pay my dues, let daddy take care of business, and I'm not going to get involved. We're not going to sustain ourselves if we stay in that mode. We have to reach into our unions, organize our unions. We have to reach outside of our unions and organize the unorganized. So we're left with there being no connection between leadership and membership. There's no empowerment of the membership from the leadership, and the membership now has little reason to follow leadership. Ask yourself why Donald Trump won in so many union households. It's obvious, right? There's no reason to trust what your international union tells you. They keep telling you you're going to get good contracts, and they keep selling us concessions in every round of contract negotiations. Our members are fed up. They're fed up with us. I hope to make a difference. We got to return to grassroots organizing inside our own houses. We got to reach out in our own communities, both locally and globally. One will not happen without the other. We're all connected. It's a global economy. I also belong to an organization called Teamsters for a Democratic Union. I'm on the steering committee there, and I'm signed up for the steering committee here. It's a rank and file movement, much reviled by the leadership. To steal a quote from Gandhi, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, and then they fight you, and then you win. That's the attitude we have to have. Teamsters for a Democratic Union have fought for the following things. We haven't won them all, but we fought for them, and this is just a small list of the things. Direct elections of officers and convention delegates. We've done that. Majority rule on contract votes. We've done that, but the Constitution allows the General President to override that. A fair grievance procedure with innocent until proven guilty. We've done that. No multiple salaries for union officials. We failed miserably so far. It's a damn shame. An end to race and sex discrimination. There's no place that exists more horribly or powerfully than inside the building at 25 Louisiana Avenue, Washington, D.C. That's the Teamsters building. It's sickening, it's sad. Pension reform and accountability. Teamster pensions are in a hell of a mess. There are proposals out there by companies like UPS to help bail us out. They're not looking out for our interest. They're looking out for their own liability. I associate with some rank and file members who came up with an idea of starting credit unions for the pension funds. Banks rip us off. Why shouldn't our money help fund our pensions and save our pensions? The leadership so far has been resistant to even hearing that. For the life of me, I can't understand it. It could be a stand-alone or stand-beside process. I don't understand why anybody would be opposed to that. We can no longer depend on a failed political system that is both a corporatocracy and a plutocracy. We cannot be left with what is no choice between two horribly flawed presidential candidates as in the last election. I've been voting for the lesser of two evils for my entire life. I'm 59 years old, enough already. We cannot stand with politicians who are groomed from the schoolhouse, school boards, to the state houses, and ultimately into national office. We are told to vote for these candidates by our leadership without our vote or input. Repeatedly, they tell us who we should be voting for. Neither of the political parties gave a rat's ass about us. The Teamsters fought trucking deregulation. Did I say something wrong? I am a truck driver. So the Teamsters fought trucking deregulation throughout the 80s and 90s, only to watch Republicans, Democrats, and Bill Clinton shove it all up our backsides. Clinton took Teamster monies with an assurance that he would stand with us on that issue. So here comes NAFTA in 1992, and guess who's supporting it? Our so-called friend Bill Clinton. Now we have Donald Trump, no friend of ours, the Teamsters with their corporate puppet Hoffa, and a corporation also known as the AFL-CIO, supporting reform of this trade agreement, with no direct links to workers in Mexico or Canada to fight it. What could possibly go wrong here? We must begin to support and develop a democratic labor party that values working people inside and out of organized labor, locally and globally. So now it brings us to the fight that the Teamsters have. We got 3 contracts expiring next year. We have ABF Freight, which is the company I drove for, UPS Freight, and UPS, all expiring next year. So you would think with the recent victories of Verizon and the Chicago teachers, this would unite the entire labor movement, and that our leadership would see this as an opportunity. The lessons of the 1997 strike during Ron Kerry's tenure are now distant memories to most people other than the ones in my age group. Many workers don't recall it, don't remember what a wonderful, magnificent accomplishment that was. So, we wound up with support. The people in the streets what helped us win this. They knew the UPS driver. They had a relationship with the UPS driver, and they understood that he or she was real and human. Today, more than half, we won many victories there. We won more full-time jobs, dignity and respect in the workplace. UPS is a horrible place to work. These folks treat you like garbage, and in some cases, garbage is treated better. Just because you're a union member and you're well paid doesn't mean you have to be treated that way. Today, more than half of all UPS employees are part-time. Part-time wages have been stagnant for years. The $15 an hour movement pays people more money than a UPS part-timer. We should be ashamed of ourselves as a labor movement. Wage progression scales are all the rage. The creation of classifications that further divide and promote wage inequity, forced overtime, increased production demands, and most importantly, harassment and intimidation as a way of life at UPS. This is certainly factoring into the recent shootings and violence at UPS centers across the country. You would think this opportunity would be embraced by the Hoffa administration. Not so. After narrowly winning in the last election and losing the majority of the vote in the United States of America, 6 of his vice presidents were replaced by Teamsters United candidates, including myself. The memo was never received. He fired his chief negotiator, who understood the only way to attain a contract was to work with UPS members who supported Fred Zuckerman and Teamsters United. The folks at UPS voted for Teamsters United by a 70% margin. He replaced the negotiator with a corporate political hack who gleefully union busted the organizers in his own organizing department. The last UPS contract took close to a year to ratify because most of the supplements were repeatedly rejected by the members and the locals across the country, the largest of which was Fred Zuckerman's Local 89, home to the UPS Air Hub in Lexington, Kentucky. Hoffa chose to jam the concessions down everybody's throat. So out of this was birthed a large and growing Vote No movement. Teamsters United is still functioning as the catalyst for this change. Hoffa and his minions can't seem to come to grips with the idea that they have no control over social media or the sporadic uprisings from within our own union. This is where change comes from, the grassroots, ground-up organizing where the members take charge. This is not new, it's not easy, but it must happen. So my only other thought is going back to history, is I would like to mention that pre-World War I, the labor movement was about all the things we're talking about here today. And through the idea of nationalism and patriotism, they stole that we were an anti-war movement, we were an anti-corporate movement, we actually wanted ownership. We wanted ownership. Thank you. We wanted ownership of our businesses. Labor is capital. Everybody seems to forget that. And we need to return to that. We need to understand, again, that's the only way we're going to get a fair shake. So, again, I would like to thank everybody for allowing me to spend a little time with you. I appreciate it.
Okay, just a quick announcement. We raised $139 for Sotracol to continue their struggle, their 6-year struggle against GM down in Bogota, Colombia. Real quickly, tomorrow morning, the first workshop begins at 9:15. So let's get here early and get an early start. We're going to have 2 workshops, and then we're going to pull it all together in a closing